Hiya, sweetheart.
Hi, Ralph.
Hey, that's a mighty friendly way to talk to a peasant.
Imagine being at a party where everyone is laughing and suddenly the host says something that makes the whole room go quiet. That's what happened to the Honeymooners in 1956.
This was the woman he should have married years ago and didn't. It was just a short sketch, so I don't remember too much about it. But it was serious, and here we were doing it on a comedy show with very little rehearsal, because as everyone knows by now, Mr. Gleason does not like to rehearse.
One scene, one line, one cold delivery from Jackie Gleason changed everything. It was the moment the show's gritty realism crossed a line. We're breaking down how that hidden moment, combined with secret political fears and sponsor backlash, sealed the fate of a television legend. The bang zoom. That went too far. It happened on October 20th, 1956. The cast and crew of the Honeymooners were getting ready for another live broadcast. You see, this was the standard for television in the 1950s. There were no retakes, there was no editing. If an actor messed up a line, if a prop broke, if someone tripped, it all went out over the airwaves to millions of homes. The pressure was, to put it mildly, intense. And the star of the show, Jackie Gleason, loved that pressure. He called it the juice. The episode for the night was titled The Deciding Vote. On paper, it was a perfect Honeymooner story. Ralph Cramden, the loudmouth bus driver, gets a letter asking him to be a poll watcher for a local election. His ego, which was already massive, inflates to the size of a parade balloon. He starts bossing Alice and his best friend Ed Norton around, acting like he's about to become the mayor, the governor, or maybe even the president. It was classic Ralph. The show was going great. The live studio audience was roaring with laughter. Art Carney, who played Norton, was landing every joke. Audrey Meadows, as the sharp-witted Alice, was getting huge applause for her comebacks. Gleason was in his element, feeding off the crowd, improvising, and being the great one. Then they came to a key scene. It was an argument in the tiny, sparse kitchen set. Ralph is on one of his tirades, full of self-importance, and Alice is trying to bring him back down to earth. This was the core of the show, the push and pull between Ralph's wild dreams and Alice's hardcore reality. The script called for Ralph to get frustrated and deliver one of his signature iconic catchphrases. Everyone in America knew these lines. One of these days, Alice. Pow! Right in the kisser. Or the other big one, bang, zoom, straight to the moon. They were comic threats. They were so over the top that nobody ever took them seriously. They were the punchline. The audience would hear the setup and they would be laughing before Gleason even finished the line. But not this night. Nobody knows for sure what was going on in Jackie Gleason's head. Was he exhausted from the non-stop live wire schedule? Was he angry about something that happened backstage? Or was he just too deep in the character of the frustrated, egotistical Ralph? Whatever the reason, when he got to the line, he didn't yell it. He didn't wave his fists in the air like a cartoon. According to crew members and audience reports from that night, his entire mood changed. He stepped closer to Audrey Meadows. His voice dropped from a comical roar to a low, cold, quiet threat. He said the line, bang, zoom, with a genuine anger, a sharp-edged malice that no one had ever heard before. It didn't sound like Ralph Cramden. It sounded scary. In the studio, the laughter died. Not a slow fade, but an instant, chilling silence. You could hear a pin drop. The audience, which had been roaring with approval just seconds before, was now frozen. They were confused. They were uncomfortable. They didn't know what they had just seen. Was that part of the show? Was Gleason really that angry? Had the joke, for the first time, stopped being a joke? On stage, Audrey Meadows, a complete professional, didn't even blink. She held her ground, took the cold threat, and delivered her next line perfectly. But backstage, it was a full-blown panic. In the control booth, the director and producers were in a cold sweat. They were live. They couldn't cut. They couldn't stop the broadcast. They just had to sit there and watch as their star, the great one, sucked all the air out of the room. The show finished, the actors took their bows, but everyone knew something had just broken. The invisible line between comedy and real-life domestic trouble had just been crossed in front of 30 million people. The sponsors, who were already nervous about the show's gritty feel, had just seen their worst nightmare broadcast live. The show was canceled soon after. The official story for decades was that the ratings were bad, but that wasn't the whole truth. That one moment, that one too real scene was the trigger. But this one moment wasn't the only secret the show was hiding. Hollywood's darkest secret. To understand why the network panicked so hard, you have to go back to the very beginning. What many overlooked is that Audrey Meadows was not the first Alice Cramden. Before The Honeymooners was its own show, it was a short sketch on Jackie Gleason's wildly popular variety show, Cavalcade of Stars. And the original actress who played Alice was a woman named Pert Kelton. And here's the thing, Kelton was a powerhouse. She had a background in vaudeville just like Gleason. She was tough, she was loud, and she was in many ways even more of a brawler than Audrey Meadows' Alice. She didn't just stand up to Ralph, she went toe-to-toe with him. The chemistry was electric and audiences loved her. Then, just as Gleason was getting ready to move to CBS and become the biggest star in the country, Pert Kelton vanished. She was just gone. The official story the network fed the newspapers was that she was having health problems. It was a lie, a convenient, cruel lie. The real reason was far more sinister and shows just how paranoid America was in the 1950s. This was the height of the Red Scare and McCarthyism. In the entertainment industry, a shadowy right-wing pamphlet was being passed around. It was called Red Channels. It was pure and simple a blacklist. It named 151 actors, writers, directors, and performers who were accused of having communist sympathies. If your name was on that list, your career was over. Networks wouldn't hire you. Sponsors wouldn't let you be in their commercials. You were toxic. Now here's the kicker. Pert Kelton was not on the list, but her husband, an actor named Ralph Bell, was. That was all it took. Just by being married to him, she was guilty by association. The sponsors, the ad agencies, and the network executives were terrified. They couldn't risk the bad press. They couldn't risk a newspaper columnist accusing the Honeymooners of being un-American. So, quietly, they pushed Pert Kelton out. There was no public announcement, no one defended her. She was just erased from the show she helped create. This was the original sin of the Honeymooners. It was a brutal move that proved years before the Classic 39 even aired that the sponsors and the network were pathologically afraid. They were afraid of controversy. They were afraid of anything that seemed too real or political. Jackie Gleason was reportedly furious. He fought for her, but the network and the sponsors wouldn't budge. The money was talking, and it was talking louder than Gleason. This left a massive hole. How do you replace Alice Cramden? The search led them to Audrey Meadows. But the network executives had a problem. They thought she was too young and, believe it or not, too glamorous to play a bus driver's wife. Audrey Meadows was a smart woman. She knew what she had to do. She went home, took off all her makeup, put her hair up in a frumpy, messy style, and put on a worn-out house dress. She then hired a photographer to come to her apartment in the early morning, before the sun was even fully up, and take pictures of her looking tired, stressed, and poor. The next day, she had the photos sent to Jackie Gleason's hotel suite. When Gleason saw them, he reportedly said, "That's her. That's Alice. Get her." She had proven she understood the grit of the character. The new cast was set, but the shadow of what happened to Pert Kelton hung over the production. It set a dark precedent. The network was watching. They were scared, and they had already proven they would cut anyone to protect their image. With a new Alice, the show was ready for prime time and its biggest battle. A reality that was too real. In the fall of 1955, Jackie Gleason made a huge gamble. He decided to end his #1 rated variety show and spin the Honeymooners off into its own standalone half-hour sitcom. The pressure was unbelievable. His sponsor, Buick, was paying a fortune, one of the biggest deals in TV history. They were betting everything on Ralph Cramden. The 39 episodes they would produce that season are now known as the Classic 39. They are considered by many to be the greatest sitcom of all time. But what most people don't get about the 1950s is how truly revolutionary this show was. In fact, it was downright dangerous. You have to understand what television was like back then. The airwaves were dominated by shows like Father Knows Best, Leave It to Beaver, and The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. These were fantasies. They were shows about perfect, happy, middle-class families living in beautiful suburban houses with white picket fences. The fathers were all-knowing and calm. The mothers were always perfectly dressed and happy. And the biggest problem in an episode was who was going to take who to the school dance. The Honeymooners threw a grenade into that perfect plastic living room. Gone was the polished suburban house. In its place was a tiny, peeling, cold water flat in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. The set was famously, almost shockingly, sparse. It was basically one room. It had a cheap table, a dresser, a sink, and an old-fashioned icebox. Not even a refrigerator. The one window looked out onto a brick wall and a fire escape. This wasn't the suburban dream. This was the working poor. This was the reality for millions of Americans who weren't living in those new suburbs. The characters were just as real. Ralph Cramden wasn't a wise patriarch. He was a bus driver with a 9th grade education, a terrible temper, and a long list of failed get-rich-quick schemes. He was a dreamer, but he was also a constant failure. He was, in many ways, television's first anti-hero. And he yelled. He yelled about money. This was the ultimate TV taboo. On other shows, money didn't exist. On the Honeymooners, it was the only thing they talked about. Ralph was always broke. His schemes were about money. His fights with Alice were about money. And Alice wasn't a smiling, docile housewife. She was sarcastic, sharp, and grounded. She was the one who had to deal with the fallout of Ralph's ego. Their arguments weren't cute, they were loud, they were biting, and they felt dangerously real. But here's the real kicker. The show was filmed live, not live in front of a studio audience the way I Love Lucy was. Lucy was shot on high-quality film with 3 cameras, and they could edit it later to get the best takes. The Honeymooners was broadcast as it happened. It was captured on something called a kinescope, which was basically a special camera pointed at a TV monitor, recording the live feed onto grainy film. It was a cheap way to save a show, which is why the classic 39 looks so raw. This live format meant no second chances. If an actor forgot a line, they had to improvise. If a prop broke, they had to work around it. And Gleason, a perfectionist from his vaudeville days, refused to rehearse. He believed rehearsals made the performance stale. The rest of the cast would rehearse all week, but Gleason would only show up for a single run-through on the day of the show. He wanted the energy to be raw, spontaneous, and a little bit dangerous. This high-wire act created amazing comedy, but it also created a huge conflict. The sponsor, Buick, was selling an aspirational product. They were selling the American dream on 4 wheels. They wanted people to watch the show and think, I should buy a beautiful new Buick and move my happy family to the suburbs. Instead, their show was about a broke, angry bus driver living in a dump who could never afford their product. This was a massive clash. The thing nobody tells you is that Buick executives were complaining all season. They hated the low-class setting. They hated the peeling wallpaper. They hated the icebox. They begged Gleason to improve the Cramdens' lives. Gleason, being Gleason, told them to get lost. The stage was set for a showdown, gritty reality versus sponsor fantasy. The Perry Como problem. Here's where the story gets even darker, and we have to get into the theories that the network was terrified of. Let's talk about what was happening off-screen. Jackie Gleason was the great one. He was the king of television, but he was also, to put it mildly, a wild man. He was famous for his all-night parties, his heavy drinking, and his giant entourage. He was known for carrying huge stacks of cash in his pockets. And he had a reputation. Wild theory number 1, the mafia connection. This wasn't some hidden secret. Gleason was open about it. He grew up in that world. He partied with well-known mobsters. He was friends with figures that were constantly in the FBI's notebooks. He was, in many ways, connected. Now imagine you are a buttoned-up executive at Buick in the 1950s. You are selling an image of safe, reliable, all-American family life. And your number 1 star, the face of your brand, is being photographed in newspapers, falling out of nightclubs at 4 in the morning, often with questionable associates. This was a public relations nightmare. The network and the sponsor saw Gleason as a loose cannon. He was completely, totally uncontrollable. He did what he wanted, when he wanted. This made them insanely nervous. This wasn't just about the show's content, it was about the star himself. Wild theory number 2, Gleason's ego. This theory is just as scandalous. Jackie Gleason was a genius, but he also had an ego the size of a city block. He hated the grind of a weekly sitcom. It was hard work, it was stressful, it was repetitive. What he loved was his variety show, The Jackie Gleason Show, where he was the undisputed king. He could do his sketches, his characters, his monologues, his dancing. He was the center of the universe. And here's the wow factor that supports this. The Honeymooners Classic 39 was not a runaway ratings hit. In fact, in its time slot, it was losing. It was getting beaten by a popular, quiet, family-friendly singer named Perry Como. Think about that. The Great One was losing to Perry Como. For a man like Gleason, this was a massive humiliation. He was working himself to the bone on a show he didn't even love, and he was losing. So, here's the theory. Did Jackie Gleason intentionally sabotage his own show? Think about it. He's tired of the grind. He's losing in the ratings. The sponsor, Buick, is already annoying him, begging him to change the set. What if he just leaned in? What if he made the show more gritty? What if he made Ralph more angry? What if the bang zoom moment in the deciding vote wasn't a mistake? What if it was a subconscious or maybe even conscious way for Gleason to blow the whole thing up? He could cross the line, scare the sponsors, get the show canceled, and then he could go back to his beloved, more profitable #1 rated variety show, and he could blame the network and the sponsors for it. It was the perfect escape. It totally fits his I do it my way personality. This theory combines everything. The bang zoom scene wasn't just a slip-up. It was the moment that the uncontrollable Gleason, the low-class character, the mafia-linked star, and the second-place ratings all crashed together into one terrifying moment for Buick. It confirmed all their fears. This man is not a safe pitchman for our cars. He is a liability. The network had to act, and their cover-up would create a legend. Why he really hid the tapes. The end was swift and silent. After the 39th episode of The Honeymooners aired, the sponsor Buick pulled their money. Just like that, the show was not renewed. There was no farewell episode. No final bow, no big press announcement. The Honeymooners, one of the most important, groundbreaking, and beloved shows in the history of television, was just gone. It was like a light switch being flipped. One day, it was the biggest thing on TV, a genuine cultural event. The next, it was history. The public was stunned. How could this happen? This was Jackie Gleason. This was Ralph Kramden. The network, CBS, and the ad agency let the slipping ratings narrative take over. It was the easy answer. Oh, the ratings were down. It was losing to the competition, Perry Como. It was a clean story. It was simple. And it was a lie. It was a clean, simple lie designed to cover up a storm of panic, fear, and politics that was raging behind the scenes. The public just saw a show that failed. But the insiders saw a train wreck they couldn't stop. The truth was darker. It was a story of sponsor terror, political blacklisting, and one star who was just too real, too raw, and too dangerous for the buttoned-up world of 1950s television. The truth about the sponsor's panic, about the political blacklisting of the first Alice Pert Kelton, and about the chilling bang zoom scene from the episode The Deciding Vote, was quietly buried. It was swept under the rug so fast it barely left a bump. It became one of television's biggest secrets, and for decades, that's where it stayed. We're here to dig it up. Let's start with the secret that was hidden before the Classic 39 show even began. Before Audrey Meadows put on the apron and became the Alice Kramden we all know, there was another Alice. In the original cavalcade of Stars sketches, the first Alice was an actress named Pert Kelton, and she was absolutely brilliant. She was tough, she was funny, and in many ways, she was even more Brooklyn than Meadows. She had the grit, she had the timing, she was Alice. But when The Honeymooners was set to become its own full-time half-hour series, the big time, Pert Kelton was suddenly gone. The official story, the studio told the press she had a heart condition and couldn't handle the stress of a weekly show. It was another clean, simple lie. The real story? The Red Scare. This was the height of McCarthyism, A single whisper, one accusation, and your entire life was over. Your career was done. And Pert Kelton's name had appeared in a vicious anti-communist pamphlet called Red Channels. This little book was a hit list for the careers of actors, writers, and musicians. Kelton was blacklisted. She was political poison. The sponsors at Buick, who were pouring millions into the show, were terrified. They weren't just selling cars, they were selling the perfect post-war American dream. And communists, or anyone accused of being one, were not part of that dream. They forced her out. They told Gleason, "It's her or us." Gleason was reportedly furious. He fought for her, but he was powerless against the studio, the sponsors, and the tidal wave of political fear sweeping the country. This decision cast a dark shadow over the production from day one. It was the show's original sin, and more importantly, it proved one thing to everyone involved. The sponsors were watching, they were terrified, and they would cut anyone at any time who stepped out of line. They were already on edge before the first episode even aired. This brings us to the classic 39 in the episode that may have sealed its fate, the deciding vote. The plot is simple. Ralph and his building's janitor are tied in a vote for their apartment building's president. Alice holds the deciding vote. But the execution of the episode was something nobody had ever seen. Remember, this wasn't a fancy Hollywood set, it was 3 cramped gray walls. It looked like a real cold water flat in Brooklyn. There was no escape. When Ralph got angry, the walls felt like they were closing in. It was claustrophobic. It was real. In the episode, Ralph, desperate to win, gets into a volcanic argument with Alice. He screams, he threatens, he paces like a caged animal. He wasn't the lovable big-mouth buffoon. He was menacing. Then, he delivers the line. He gets right in Alice's face. He raises his fist. He looks like he is really going to hit her, and then he screams the most infamous line in the show's history. In the original kinescope, you can feel the air get sucked out of the room. The live studio audience doesn't just get quiet, they freeze. That laugh track you hear on the reruns today? Many television historians claim it was sweetened, added in or turned up way later to cover up the horrifying dead silence of the audience. In that one moment, Jackie Gleason wasn't Ralph Cramden anymore. He was just a very large, very angry man threatening his wife on national television. The switchboards at CBS didn't just light up, they practically melted. But it was the call from Buick's headquarters that mattered. Their brand was about shiny, happy, new car in the driveway American families. This was not that. This was dark. This was domestic strife. This was the kind of thing that happened behind closed doors, not what you broadcast into living rooms. This was the one thing the sponsors, already nervous from the Pert Kelton incident, were most afraid of. The show was too real. The panic was on. But what if the bang zoom moment wasn't an accident? What if it wasn't just an actor getting lost in the role? This brings us to Gleason himself. The man was a certified genius, but he was also a notorious perfectionist, famously difficult and known for his massive ego. He was the great one after all. He didn't share a spotlight, and he was working at a pace that would kill a normal person. He was writing, producing, directing, and starring in a weekly high-stakes show. The classic 39 was his masterpiece, but it was also his prison. He was, in a word, burned out. He missed the freedom of his original Jackie Gleason show. He missed the variety. Being just Ralph Cramden every single week in the same apartment with the same people, it was a cage. He needed his orchestra, he needed his chorus girls, he needed his other characters like Reginald Van Gleisen and the Poor Soul. He needed to be the ringmaster of a 3-ring circus, not just one act. The theory goes that Gleason, miserable and trapped, started to self-sabotage. He knew exactly what the sponsors wanted. They wanted safe, they wanted happy, they wanted aspirational. So he gave them the opposite. He pushed Ralph to be louder, angrier, and more menacing. He made the apartments look even more run down. He made the poverty more real. Was the bang zoom line a desperate ad-lib born of pure exhaustion and rage, or was it a deliberate, calculated poke at the censors and the sponsors? What if Jackie Gleason wanted to get canceled? What if he intentionally pushed that bang zoom moment so far over the line that Buick had to pull the plug? It would be the perfect crime. He gets his freedom back, he gets his variety show back, and the show he was tired of making becomes a martyred masterpiece, killed by the network suits. He gets to be the victim and the escape artist. This is where Jackie Gleason played his trump card. The show was dead. Gleason was either devastated or he was secretly relieved. Maybe both. Ralph Kramden wasn't just a character, he was a piece of Gleason's soul. But Gleason was also a brilliant, ruthless businessman. In a move that was completely unheard of at the time, an absolute shock to the industry, Gleason personally bought all the rights to the classic 39 kinescopes from CBS. He owned them, outright. This meant that for years the network couldn't even air reruns of their failed show without his permission. He took those 39 episodes, his mistake, his masterpiece, and he locked them in a vault. And this brings us to, why did he really lock them up? The official story is that it was a genius business move to wait until their value went up. And it was a genius move. But let's dig into the what if. What if the self-sabotage theory is true? He locks them up so no one can re-examine the evidence of his burnout. What if he was genuinely ashamed? What if he was ashamed of the grainy, low-budget kinescopes? What if he didn't want people to re-examine that bang zoom moment from The Deciding Vote? What if he knew that scene was a mistake, a moment of real-life anger that bled onto the screen and he couldn't stand to look at it? What if he wanted the memory of the show to be perfect, even if the reality wasn't? And here's an even wilder thought. What if one of the 39 episodes was so dark, so problematic, so far over the line that he destroyed it? What if we've only ever seen the classic 38? There's no proof, but with a vault locked that tight for that long, you have to wonder. Or the wildest theory of all, what if Gleason, the ultimate showman, planned all of it? What if he knew that being canceled, martyred by the network, and locking the show in a vault would make it more valuable, more legendary than just letting it run for 5 safe seasons? What if the vault wasn't a prison? What if it was an incubator for a legend? For years, the Honeymooners existed only in memory. Gleason got his wish. He went right back to the Jackie Gleason show and was once again the #1 star on television. He was the great one, bigger than ever. He would do new Honeymooner sketches, but they were different. In the 1960s, he moved his whole operation to Miami. The new sketches were in glorious color. The set was bigger. They had song and dance numbers. Alice was played by a different actress. Then another one. Did the network make the biggest mistake in TV history? Or was Ralph Kramden's anger always too much for prime time? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.